I think we'll have some more folks continue to join, and I hear some chatter in the background. We'll just remind everyone, as a note of housekeeping, to please mute yourself. You're welcome to have your cameras on. We will ask folks, if you can, to use the raise hand function at the top center of your team screen to ask questions or raise discussion points throughout. But we want to welcome everyone to the second in a series of webinars that we're conducting with the Kansas Infrastructure Hub in the city of Topeka. Today's is on the impact of executive orders and memos. I know folks have been seeing a lot in the news, so it's a real timely topic. These are a series of webinars, and we'll come back to this at the end, that are being held the first Wednesdays of every month. So we'll be having another one on March 5th. But my name's Jason Fazal. I'm with the Kansas Infrastructure Hub. I'll be helping moderate kind of behind the scenes here. But with that, I will hand it over to Matthew Voles, our Executive Director.
All right. Thanks, Jason. Appreciate that. Thanks, everyone, for joining today. This is obviously a timely topic. It's been a very active past 2 weeks here in Kansas, as well as across the country, with all the information coming out of Washington, D.C. So we just want to take a moment to get everybody up to speed on where things stand right now. We also want to have a discussion. We want to hear from you. What are your concerns? What questions are you getting? And what are you hearing too? And so please feel free to chime in, give thoughts, opinions, but mainly ask questions of us. We've got a great panel of folks here today. We have Jason Fazal, who introduced himself earlier, from the Infrastructure Hub. We have Kenda Fanzo from the Infrastructure Hub team, Anna Valdez, again from our Hub team, and then from our local partners, April Hazen Schaefer from the City of Topeka, and then Allie Weems from the City of Topeka as well. Take advantage of these folks and ask questions as they come up. This is a great panel of experts, and I've spent a lot of time writing grants and working in this field. Just a quick caveat, this is a very, very fluid landscape these days. Things are changing every day, and we may or may not have an answer to everything, and no one really does at this point, but just keep that in mind. Our challenge is just keeping up with all the information coming out of Washington, D.C. We try to interpret it. We try to interpret the meaning, the impacts, and share that with you all, our customers. And potentially we're erring on the side of sharing more versus less, but you just have to take in what you can and use it as you see fit. Ultimately, take this back to your leadership, take back what you learned today, and we're going to take back what we learned from you as well. So please share this information. So to get everybody up to speed and on the same level, let's do a quick recap of these last couple of weeks. And I know a lot of this has been in the news and the media, but let's make sure everybody's up to speed. So there's a couple of things that are important here. There are executive orders, which are what the president uses to shape policy and drive actions. And then there's the OMB memos, or the Office of Management and Budget memos, and those are put out to implement the policies of the administration. That's really been the focus and what we've been seeing a lot of for the last couple of weeks. Ultimately, federal agency personnel are the ones who are responsible for delivering instructions and guidance based on these executive orders and these OMB memos. We've seen some of that already with the cabinet posts as they've been confirmed and filled, and those agency heads are now getting in there and they're starting to implement these policies and executive orders. So here is a not so quick recap of the last couple of weeks. So as you saw on January 20th, on Inauguration Day, there was the signing ceremonies in the Oval Office, and there was the signing ceremony on the stage at the Capital One Arena. Well, one of those executive orders that was signed rescinded 78 previous administration executive orders. And what that did is it did rescind two executive orders related to the implementation of the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, or otherwise known as the IIJA, and also rescinded the implementation of the IRA funding. Didn't rescind the funding, rescinded the funding guidance. So it didn't impact the funding itself, but the guidance it is going to get changed. We've anticipated this all along. It happens with every change in administration. We should expect that, and it is happening here as well. So we're going to talk more about that a little bit later with some of the changes we've seen already to some of the grant programs. So on January 20th, there was another executive order issued. It was called Unleashing American Energy. And that's the one that sort of caused the first dust up with federal agencies and wondering if funding had been paused entirely or not. And that one had a certain section that if you interpret it a certain way, the way it was written, it ordered a pause in the disbursement of all BIL and IRA funding, including grant funding, which is the focus of our office. That was the one that really caused a lot of concern. Now, on the following day, on January 21st, the OMB issued a clarification memo, number OMB M2511, in which they clarified and said, no, the language was only intended to impact a certain narrow focus of green energy funding. Think EV infrastructure, wind, solar type funding. So that was crisis averted there, and things calmed down at that point. Then the following Monday, January 27th, the OMB published Memo M25-13, which was titled Temporary Pause of Agency Grant, Loan, and Other Financial Assistance Programs. Again, that one contains some very broad language in it regarding the funding of federal programs, which again caused the federal agencies to have to react. And this one actually got a lot of media attention with very alarmist headlines, without a lot of in-depth analysis. But again, federal agencies had to react to this. They had to take action based on the way the memo was written. Again, it was very broad the way it was written. And we've got a lot of input, or a lot of requests for input from our office, from the governor's office, along with other agencies, and a lot of questions from our local agencies. The Hub did put out some social media and some reports on this, and we anticipated that clarification would be forthcoming on this because, again, it was very broad language, similar to the previous week, but a bit more aggressive. And then, as we anticipated, on the next day, on the afternoon of January 28th, the OMB did issue a clarification memo, M25-13 Q&A, that once again narrowed the focus of the language down to, again, that very narrow window of green energy and DEI funded type projects. And then on January 29th, the following day after that, the OMB issued Memo M25-14 that rescinded all of Memo M25-13. So, the crisis again averted. Then there was a little bit more dust that went up over that because the White House posted some things on X saying that although the memos had been rescinded, the president's original executive orders were not and would be rigorously implemented, quote unquote. So that is where the federal agencies are right now. They're implementing these executive orders as best they can with the personnel they've got right now. And again, this is a moving target, and these executive orders are still in effect, and that's what these agencies are trying to adhere to. So what we've seen since then, on January 29th, we've seen agencies issue memos to implement these executive orders. We saw one from the US DOT come out that actually asked for steps to be taken to implement the provisions of these executive orders. It's got a requirement that within 10 days of that memo of 1-29-25, they have to report all DOT orders, directives, rules, regulations, guidance, etc., that might be subject of those executive orders related to DEI, green energy, etc. And then after 10 days, they actually have to take some sort of action on those. Also on that same day, January 29th, the US DOT Secretary signed an order titled Ensuring Reliance Upon Sound Economic Analysis in DOT Policies, Programs, and Activities. This one requires rigorous economic analysis of positive cost-benefit calculations. It does require the update of all NOFOs, grant agreements, so that they're consistent with these executive orders. It's really important about that memo. That's one I want people to really pay attention to. It telegraphs a lot in there what the new criteria for grants is likely to be. So take a look at that one, and we'll send out links to all these things. Well, actually, there were links to some of this in our newsletter last week, but we'll make sure everybody gets links to these new memos as well. On January 31st, I'm almost done here, there was another executive order called Unleashing Prosperity Through Deregulation. This one here is new. It just put out last Thursday. This one's been buried a little bit by some of the other headlines coming out of the administration, but this one is a 10-to-1 deregulation rule. So what it says in this executive order is that if you're a federal agency and you implement a new rule or regulation, you must repeal 10 rules and regulations from the past. And also the cost of any new rule or regulation must be zero or less. So it can't be any unfunded mandates. This is one that I think people are not really aware of yet or not paying attention to, but could have a big impact. And then finally, on Monday of this week, there was a court order that challenged the OMB memo. But even though that one was rescinded, the court said it did apply to the executive orders as well. And it said essentially that Fed agencies cannot freeze or terminate awards, future awards, or change rules based on executive orders. So stay tuned. Things are about to get really interesting. And that's essentially where everything stands right now. So you still got federal agencies out there trying to implement these executive orders, which they have to do. And then you've got a court, that a federal court, district court, that's saying, hold on, you can't really do that. So it's all going to have to get worked out here as we move forward. All right. Now, with that, we're going to talk about some questions that we've received, some frequently asked questions, if you will. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn this over to our panel, and I'm going to ask them a series of questions and let them answer this. So first up.
And Matt, just real quick, you
Yep.
mentioned the links, and I just wanted to mention, I put in the chat a link to the webinar slides, and you can pull those up, and all these links, like the one that's shown in the bottom right-hand corner of this slide, you can click on those and open up in your web browser.
Great. Yep. Thanks, Jason. Okay, so I'm going to ask a series of questions. If you want to flip to that next slide there, and open it up for questions to our audience here in just a bit. First question is going to go to Anna Valdez, who's on our hub team. Anna, here's a question for you. What do all these changes mean to us, and or what is the impact of these to the federal grant programs in the future of all these changes?
So I think first and foremost, it means things are changing, right? So like Matt mentioned, executive orders don't alter the underlying legislative mandates of the program. So the program still exists via congressional approval, but the way that they're implemented and or the policies and agreements that come from there will change. And so part of this is really just, again, each administration is going to take the set of funding that is available and implement those programs utilizing their set of requirements, guidance, and whatnot to shape the program to meet their policy initiatives. And so one that I think we saw come fairly quickly with the executive order releases is the RAISE program as the NOFO was open. If any of you were applying to that and had to quickly pivot to that change of that NOFO, I actually like that we went back and looked. So RAISE has been around. It was previously called BUILD in the former administration. Before that, it was called TIGER. So that program is funded through a legislative mandate. But again, the guidance, the requirements, the review criteria, certain provisions change from each administration. And so in the middle of the executive orders that were coming out, they also had changed the RAISE NOFO to call it BUILD again. And then there was a number of things that they changed within that NOFO. Most particularly as they removed references to all those rescinded executive orders, clarified different grant agreements, and just really aligned that NOFO to those executive orders. So I think all of that to say is we will see changes in federal grant programs. You are seeing a lot of programs recently being paused, removed from grants.gov. There is an order of just general process, I would say, that you're going to see things, right? So grants that are already awarded and projects continued usually are lower risk to be stopped. I say usually because there are things that can change, but those NOFOs that are currently out and open, those are things that the administration is going to pause to take a look at and see what updates do they want to make or can they make to those programs to further align their policy initiatives.
Yeah, great. And I actually took comfort, if you take comfort in that. I took comfort in the fact that they made that change from raise to build, meaning to me that their intention is not to pull back the funding or rescind funding. It really is to change the guidance and keep these programs alive and keep them going. Okay, our next question is for Kenda Fonzo, who's also on our hub team. Kenda, what are the impacts of these grant agreements and contracts? What impacts are we anticipating with all these changes?
So I think going along with what Anna's talking about, there are grant agreements that are already existing. So if you are doing what you have already set out to do, you already have a signed contract, follow that guidance until you receive information, amendments, otherwise from the agency. You should always look at checking in with your legal advisors, reviewing any proposed changes. One of the other things is to draw down on available funding. And it's common to have multiple agreements with different requirements due to policy and timing changes. So make sure that you're going back to that contract agreement that you have in order to view what your opportunities and or adjustments should look like. And if you have questions, prepare your question in writing, get that direction from your legal advisors and potentially also your agency contact. Now is the time to have your I's dotted and your T's crossed, have good documentation on hand, and make sure that you're getting that clarification from the direct source. If you have an award that was already announced, keep that announcement letter. File it away, put it in a PDF, make sure that it's available. Any news articles that were generated from your announcement, also keep that. Keep a separate PDF file. Make sure everything is together and that everyone is aware on your team where those documents are housed. And then potentially consider reaching out to your congressional representatives about the importance of that project. So if there are future changes or adjustments, they can make sure that they're aware of that project and ensure that funding moves forward for you appropriately. And then if you have a drafted contract, make sure that you are in contact with your federal or state agency contact. And we're going to talk a little bit more about staffing changes later. But try and get a status update and expect those processes or those timelines to be adjusted and delayed. So don't let that surprise you. Get things in writing, know when to follow up. And make sure, again, that you're keeping good documentation so that you can use that information in your later correspondences.
Yeah, good advice, Kenda. I appreciate that. One other thing on that, contacting your congressional representatives. I was talking to Representative's office here just today, and one clue they gave me was that if you have a large business that is impacted by a grant award that may be at risk, please have them reach out to your congressional representatives. That does get a little more attention, as does a state senator, state representative, and or the mayor of your town where that grant may be located at. So use those contacts you've got to reach out to your national representatives. Okay, our next question is going to our local agency reps from the city of Topeka, Allie Weems and April Hazen Schaefer from the city of Topeka again. So Allie and April, What are your concerns and how do you think staffing changes at the federal level will impact the grant process for our local agencies here in Kansas?
Yeah, so I can kick us off a little bit. I know that, it takes people to do these sorts of things, and there's downstream impacts all the time. For us, the concern is the delay and just being able to communicate that out to our stakeholders, and those can be internal and external and otherwise. So it's really important for us as an organization to have our pulse on the process as we know it to be, but we also understand a lot of these things change and the grant process in general typically doesn't have a concrete timeline. So trying to adapt and understanding who to reach out to and how to kind of ignore some of the noise that's gone on. I know a lot of this political discussion can kind of be a chess match, and for us municipalities, we're not really caught up in that realm. So to be able to know what's practical and who to go to in terms of our contacts at KDOT and our contacts at the legislature, really being able to understand who's got our back as a municipality, who can we rely on to get us the information that we need in order to deliver accurate and timely information to our stakeholders.
April, anything to add to that?
You're muted, April.
Sorry, we are seeing some delays actually in our contracting process. Everything was done and we were asked to get information to our federal partners. And we did all of that very quickly. And then now it's radio silence. So for us, it's just we have to be okay with the fact that we're through the contracting process. But now we know that there's going to be another delay. And so, being able to accept that and to tell other people how and why will be our biggest challenge.
And just to piggyback off of that as well, I know I don't want to say easy to pin blame, but a lot of these federal agencies also don't know what's going on right now. It's very unknown. So there can't be a lot of consistent communication on timelines right now, as I can imagine they're not so certain either and don't want to commit to that.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And as Candace said earlier, stay in contact with your federal agency reps that you're working with. But we talk to those folks on a weekly basis. And yeah, Allie, you're exactly right. They're in a situation where when things come out in an executive order, they have to react. We've seen a lot of the things that are going on in DC right now with some agencies being shuttered, so people told not to come in the next day. It's a very stressful situation for them, and I don't envy what they're going through right now. So, thank you. Now, we're going to take a little pause here and ask you all if you have questions. Again, use the raise hand icon, come off mute, state your name and organization, or put a question in the chat box, and Jason is monitoring that. So we'll open it up for questions, and Jason will let you moderate that if you can.
Right, I will come off mute, and I put a post in the chat as well, just so everyone knows where that's at. It's located near the top center of the screen. It'll open up a bar on your right-hand side that you can chat in, and then just 3 icons over is the raise your hand button. But we don't want to stifle any discussion, so if you have trouble with that, feel free to just come off mute and ask a question. Okay, we've got our first question. We, Garver, are in the final stages of a grant agreement drafting for multiple programs and have been told by at least one federal agency that agreement signatures are in a temporary hold. I don't know if anyone else has heard anything similar or if we have any other comments on that.
I see Adrian added a question there. So what are the
Thank you.
additional risks to grant recipients and the applicants themselves? Anna, you were touching on this about the risks that we've seen so far and what we anticipate. Do you want to recap that
Yeah.
or cover that?
Absolutely. So I think first and foremost would be obviously pulling back that agreement, unfortunately, and or changing the provisions. So one of the executive orders on unleashing American energy and a couple on the DEI had very specific things around the Green New Deal, DEI efforts, things of that sort. If those grant agreements that have already gone out have those provisions, it's likely that the new administration would take those provisions out and probably put in different types of provisions in that grant agreement. So they could be looking at that. Again, I think things that are kind of out and awarded usually are at lower risk for being rescinded back. But to that point, you might also see some grant amendments coming through from your federal grantor once they get up and going again to change those provisions. If they don't change those provisions, we talked about internally the possibility of running 2 years of that federal funding with different agreements. So if you have a current grant from a federal program and you get it again the next year, you might have different requirements, different provisions based on those agreements. So I think to Kenda's point, make sure that you have that documentation, you have everything saved in a file so that you're aware of kind of what could be the possibility or the different changes between the two grant projects that you have.
Yeah, and there's also that memo I mentioned earlier that came out from USDOT, and I'm sure similar memos are coming out from other departments and bureaus within the federal government. But it was the one dated on January 29th of 25. It's titled "Ensuring Reliance Upon Sound Economic Analysis in DOT Policies, Programs, and Activities." And there is one section in there where it does talk about the actions that they are requiring their offices to take. And it says update and revise all notices of funding opportunity and grant agreements. And then it says review their existing grant agreements and amend the general terms and conditions. So, if they take that action, and they should, I mean, they're being told to, I think I would expect delay in the time it's going to take to review all those grant agreements that are existing and ones they're even working on right now. And getting to April's point earlier, expect delay. We're going to see delay. I just don't think there's any other way around that.
All right, we do have another question. Teams has another functionality called Q&A, and I'm not last time we found out that not everybody could see that, so I'm just going to read this out again for everyone. This is from Kenji Brooks. A lot of these grants are tied to payroll and some are reimbursement grants, which means we won't ask for the funding until 2026 to reimburse for 2025 spending. So there will be a gap if programs are terminated. What do you recommend we do to avoid a year's worth of payroll not being funded anymore?
Anybody have an answer for that?
We
Wanna
just
take
had
that
this.
Oh, good. Go ahead, April.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, we just had this scenario come down, and my best suggestion is to check to see if you have to wait a full year to draw down, because a lot of ours, we have one with Department of Justice, and we can draw it down at any time. And so, we have said, as soon as you can draw it down or as soon as you get bills in, do it, and don't let it hang out there for a year or even longer. So, that'd be the probably the best way to avoid having, that full year of money that you put out and then aren't able to draw down when you need it.
Yeah, and I did hear this morning that the federal reimbursement system is up and running and working right now. So you can still submit for reimbursements.
All right, Daniel Gabor asks, have we received an update on CDBG grants? I don't know if anyone's heard anything of those.
Yeah, I've not heard any updates on CDBG and not seen anything come out of Commerce unless anyone else has. Those are managed by the Department of Commerce here in the state of Kansas.
Hi everyone, it's Jessica Pierce. I'm also at the Infrastructure Hub. I was in CDBG before. I have heard the last I knew they still had everything on pause and were figuring things out. So it would be beneficial. You should contact your CDBG rep directly to figure out what their next steps are.
Well, as of late last week, the governor did announce, I think almost 11 million in CDBG grants. And so looking at the governor's website, she has her latest press release and it's on there as well.
Yep, definitely reach out, to Tim or Jenny or Jason and even Andrew and Ann, and they can help you figure out what's going on and where to go from here.
Okay, our next question is from Adrienne Covington Graham. With the understanding that we must read the NOFO requirements carefully and follow the guidelines as written, what is the best approach to budget development for potential grant-funded projects?
Yeah, Jason, you want to bring the slides back up again and flip to that next slide. That does cover budgets. And here's what I'll say about what these changes, how these changes impact budgets. Definitely need to be looking at them a little bit differently. You have, of course, a lot of talk about the tariffs with Mexico and Canada and China. That's a potential increase in costs for materials. You need to plan that into your budget, whether that's by including a contingency or just adding a bit of an inflation factor to those costs. You've got to be thinking about that. You've got the Build America, Buy America requirements. Those have always been in there, but obviously there's going to be even more emphasis on that now. Policy changes, the federal cost share. Now, this is something that we're sort of just hearing or reading between the lines, if you will. Right now, a lot of federal programs are 75-25 split or an 80-20 split or a 90-10 split, meaning it's 80% federal funding, 20% local match. And that's where the Build Kansas Fund comes into play. I mean, we provide that local match for grant programs that are funded by the BIL. That's the basis of that whole Build Kansas Fund program. I was reading in this US DOT memo from January 29th that they are considering that they want to have stronger match requirements in these what they phrase it stronger co-funding requirements, meaning that they want to have more local match into these grant applications. They also are talking about implementing user pay models, which means just that the people who are benefiting from these programs are the ones who are paying for these programs and these projects. So I think that's definitely a consideration. Again, with your budgets, increase your material costs, but also start thinking about the fact your federal cost share may be going up from this point forward.
And to piggyback off of that too, and not to take a read the tea leaves approach to this, but thinking about co-funding opportunities, particularly with your county or if you have regional partners, I think often they look favorably on that as reviewers to look at ways that you're really monopolizing on the occupied space or assets that you have. So sometimes that's re-strategizing what your priorities may be for grant projects, looking at ways that you can kind of show that collective partnership with your joint agencies.
We
And
do
this
have a
is
couple.
Kenda again. I just want to reiterate, if you already have a grant agreement, make sure that you're in good communication with your legal advisors regarding any type of changes or adjustments before they are made. So again, you'll want to be very cautious and careful to go back to what is in your current agreement, and get clarification from the agency directly before you make adjustments or changes.
We do have one more comment and question in the chat. Maybe we'll address those quick and then go on to the rest of the slides. But Jess, Travis, we'll actually come back to you here shortly. We do have, you mentioned on a slide, so we'll hear more about the Municipal Investment Fund. But then Christy asks, should we continue to develop grant strategies that address EPA emissions and environmental impacts as required in the past? Or should we expect to not get points or even deductions for proposals that address these issues?
That's a really good question, Christy. I think the best advice is to look at the current NOFO. And again, a lot of these NOFOs are going to get pulled back and they're going to get edited. And I'm willing to bet a lot of that will get taken out of the criteria, and that criteria will change. If I had to bet on what the new criteria is going to be, again, this memo of January 29th sort of forecast a little bit what they're looking for. I'll just read them off to you. Benefits to families or communities, economic opportunities, jobs, healthcare facilities, recreational activities, commercial activity, alleviating poverty, enhancing safety, benefiting families, quality of life, increasing standard of living. So, I mean, a lot of it has not changed from the criteria that we're used to seeing, but, obviously you don't hear them mention emissions and environmental impact and environmental justice and equity and any of that. So, take that for what it's worth. But will you get deducted points? No, but I mean, there was something in that build NOFO change last week that, did say, do not, mention certain things. So, but, I don't think you get deducted points. Anybody else have any thoughts on that or input?
I'll just add, Matt, I think one thing that we talked about internally is if you are currently writing a grant proposal, continue doing that, although NOFOs may change at the last minute, and you might have to pivot a little bit. Don't take your foot off the gas because things are rapidly changing. And so if you've already got a team together, you've already gone through that process, maybe you have a regional group going, letters of support. Those are all things you want to keep doing. I know we'll talk about that a little bit later, but along those lines of, will you have to change some of your narrative or your project? Maybe, but it's a lot easier to change if you've got that momentum going than to stop and try to get everybody back on the same page again.
Yeah, really good point. And that's a good transition to a couple slides that we're going to do before we wrap up here. And this sort of piggybacks a little bit on what we talked about the last webinar. So I'm going to turn over to Anna, Allie, and April to talk about looking for federal grant funding and then actions to take right now.
Yeah, so this is the evergreen part of the discussion, is the things that don't change. So where to go for grant opportunities. We definitely went into a long and robust discussion about different sources, and we'll continue to do that in the following slides. But definitely want to be aware and bookmark any opportunities, any links for agency websites, because that's really where the most accurate, up-to-date information is going to come from. Grants.gov being a prime example of that. really knowing who to reach out to, as was discussed earlier, with your agency representative and your local or regional partners through KDOT or through the hub. But webinars like this are great as well, and just being aware of those opportunities and signing up for great newsletters like the hub has to learn about opportunities to get in touch with peer communities and other agencies as those opportunities become available. And so April and I, we can kind of talk about this as well. As was mentioned by Anna, to foot on the gas, it's definitely not a time to slow down because this is all happening, because it is kind of a distraction in a way. It's a meaningful distraction in that it can influence the work that we do as municipalities, but it is so critical to do that back end work right now as all of this is going on, to collect that information on the back end and to maybe think about priority projects that we have, and kind of think about budgets and what items on your budget will have to increase as a potential result of Buy America provisions, and just being more aware of those strategic partnerships that can be forged while there are not active opportunities to apply to, but definitely still wanting to maintain grant readiness and meticulous through this process instead of kind of running and hiding.
And now's a really good time to, if you don't have a grant team or you don't have people that you call, to go ahead and get that together, so that if somebody hears one thing, they can let the rest of the team know, or, you can have a discussion about that. And I think the thing that never changes necessarily with grants is there's always going to be a need. And so as communities, we really need to step back and think, what are our needs? What do we need to be watching for? And go ahead and have those things in your mind, so that when a NOFO does come out, you're not trying to think up a program or trying to decide what you want to do. Have those projects in mind already. Go ahead and do some research, and then that way, you'll be first to apply when those come out.
Yeah, good points, April. What actions can you take now? Kenda, do you have any input on this?
Absolutely. So first and foremost, take a deep breath. It will all be okay. There are always changes throughout the different administrations, so take some comfort in that. Many of us have been in the grant field for well over 20 years or more. So, we're still here, we're still working. The need, as April just said, has always been there, and it will always be there. Be prepared for delays. I think that's the main message. And inform your governing officials. Be prepared to have good discussions to make sure that they're aware of the projects and programs that are important to you. Make sure that you're very explicit about how those things align to the current administration. Find that synergy, find those themes that can be really important and helpful to them as they go and advocate for you on your behalf. Wait for agencies to provide the guidance. I cannot stress this enough. Do not react or make changes based off of an executive order or a memo that comes out without having that information clarified with your legal advisors and with the agency. That is first and foremost. We're not necessarily lawyers, and so we need to make sure that we are beholden to those contract agreements and that everything goes through the correct channels and processes as they're trying to realign and make these changes and adjustments. Draw down on available funding with those signed contracts. Again, take a look, make sure that you can do that. And if so, take advantage of that opportunity as the portal is still open. Build relationships with state agencies and other stakeholders. This is a really good time to take advantage of talking to your state representatives, your state agency representatives. There is a lot of federal funding that comes in the form of grant pass-through grants. So make sure that they're aware of what it is you're trying to do, because they might be able to help you pivot and or adjust or make recommendations on projects or programs that would be helpful and useful to you. Review different funding streams is also something that you can do. There's private and public funding. There are still some federal opportunities that are active. So, there's a handful of them, but they're still there. And, again, as the administration gets more clarity and more information, certainly those NOFOs will be expected to come back out. They just might be a little bit different or have some different guidelines. So we'll just want to make sure that we're reviewing the information quickly, but that we're slow to react so that we're processing it in the correct way. Focus on good communication. Again, making sure that you're utilizing your resources, that you're talking with your consultants. One of the things that I've spoken with a client about is if you are working with other grant consultants or firms on projects, have good communication with them. Tell them what your priorities are. How are you guys going to pivot? How will you adjust? If you are thinking that there could be a financial burden, have that open discussion with them. I think everyone in the grant world is very cognizant of what is going on and how it might impact you as a municipality or entity or organization. And everyone I know is really open to making sure that we're being mindful of those fears and that we're able to talk and communicate effectively to work through anything that might come up. And again, keep making sure that your projects are grant ready. You're wanting to apply still. You still have major projects. Some are multi-million-dollar projects. Federal funding has typically been a good source in order to make those projects come to life. And so, making sure that you're informed and you're knowledgeable about what is coming out, when things are coming out. You don't necessarily always have to know everything, but you have to be resourceful to know who can maybe help you find it. I'm going to put another shameless plug in for the hub. We are all technical assistants. We're here to help. We are monitoring the political landscape, the changing landscape. And, that's one of the services that we provide to you for free. And we are here to help.
Yeah, and Mark, I see your comment and yeah, agree 100%. But keep trying. Ask us questions. I mean, we try to maintain those contacts with those state and federal agencies, and we ask them questions as well. So please reach out. And Mark and I met at the league meeting here about a week and a half ago. So yeah, and I understand what you're talking about. Terrence Cook, you've got a comment in there that in the chat box that's interesting. I was not aware of a meeting on February 13th. And do you have any more details on that, or can you come off mute or forward us something on that? Was it FHWA, or was it a different federal agency, or was it a state agency? State agency. Okay. Well, we'll do a little more investigating on that. And then to one of Kenda's points, waiting for agencies to provide guidance. Yeah, please. The media has a lot of stories about this, especially when it comes to federal funding. But do a little more investigating versus just reading the headlines. And again, please reach out, ask us questions. That's what we're here for. So talking about some other funding sources, again, this is piggybacking a little bit off of what we talked about here at the last seminar. April or Allie, you sort of led this part of the discussion. Do you want to talk a little bit about this before we wrap up?
Sure, I will. So one of the biggest things, that we think about is, the big, huge grants, the $10 million grants, the really big ones. And while those are nice, we also have to remember that there's also state funded grants, and there's also foundation grants in a lot of Kansas. And so, often those are even the state and the private, the foundations are sometimes great for people that are just starting to write a grant or just starting to learn, because they are a little bit, not a lot, but a little more flexible. And so, now's the time to really dig into, hey, what does the state offer? I think on the next couple of slides, we do have links to all of the Kansas departments that have grants and grant specific pages. So these are all interactive. So, when you get this, click on them and go through and look, because there may be things for your community on here that you would never find in a federal grant. But that your community needs. So just make sure that you're not only aware of these programs, but that you are actively looking at them and looking for them.
And April, I'll come off mute here for a second. On our next slide are the foundation and local community foundations. We also had Jess Travis on the line, who had information about the Coalition for Green Capital and a program that they are opening up. Jess, if you can come off mute, you're welcome to tell us more about that program.
Sure. Thank you so much. My name is Jess Travis, and I am a program director with the Climate and Energy Project. We're a statewide organization, a nonprofit 501c3. Our mission is a equitable transition to a clean energy future, and we are the current recipient and hopeful applicant of multiple federal funding opportunities that are now on pause. But one that is not on pause is one with the Coalition for Green Capital called the Municipal Investment Fund. And I can provide a direct link to that, but for more information. But the Climate and Energy Project, as a not-for-profit, nonprofit organization, is looking to partner with multiple communities in Kansas that are interested in pursuing that opportunity. The caveat is that there's a couple, not a lot, but a couple, is that application is, oh, thank you, Lindsay. My colleague, Lindsay Hamilton, put the link for the opportunity in the chat, but it is due March 5th. And knowing that many communities face process challenges in getting things before council and approved, this opportunity does allow for the nonprofit to be the primary applicant and for the municipality or the local unit of government to function as the co-applicant. And then upon award, that would fund market building opportunities in that community to bring developers, encourage innovation, and improve the entire community, make it more resilient. I do see a hand up, and then I'm just going to pause because I'm sure folks have questions I may or may not be able to answer.
Jessica, I think that's you.
It is, but it's not in relation just to what you're talking about. Just so everyone knows, I did just talk to Andrew, and the CDBG meeting on February 13th is going forward. It is mandatory if you want your contracts, and HUD is proceeding as business as usual for the time being.
Do we have any other?
Well, one quick question, Jess, that the community has to be, I saw the size requirement is 10,000 or more, correct?
Unfortunately, yes. My community of Pratt, Kansas is just 400 under that. And so although I have made requests for them to lower that number, as a lot of rural communities in Kansas could really benefit from this, they are sticking with that minimum number of a population of 10,000. It could be a muni, could be a city, it could be a county, or another local unit of government, including a tribe.
Yeah, we had a really good conversation with the folks from the Coalition for Green Capital here last week. Got a lot of information, and we're planning to push some information out about that program here in the very near future, with that deadline coming up early next month. Thanks for getting on, though.
All right, with 5 minutes left, we just wanted to open it back up for questions or discussion. Again, feel free to raise your hand or come off mute and come on camera and raise anything, or put it in the chat box.
And obligatory, if there are any questions that you'd prefer not attach your name to in a public forum, you're always welcome to email any one of us. I'm speaking on behalf of the group. So happy to handle this offline as well.
And I did just put our general email address, bil@ks.gov, in the chat. Any parting thoughts from our panelists?
Now, did you want to put your reminder about our summit coming up in Lindsborg, Kansas? But in general, I'll just say thank you to everybody for getting on today. Thanks for all the patience as we work our way through this. Again, no one knows all the answers yet, but we're trying to interpret as best we can, try to keep up with all the information coming out of DC. And again, we'll push that out and share that with you, probably, overshare to the point where you're going to get sick of it. But we think that's the better way to go. So, but thanks everybody for getting on. Jason?
Yeah, just wanted everyone to be aware of our upcoming 2025 Kansas Infrastructure Summit. It will be held in beautiful Lindsborg, Kansas on April 23rd. And registration is live for that now. I'll put a link in the chat, but you can also on the slides click this image and it'll allow you to register there as well. And then just to point out, again, we'll be having these webinars every first Wednesday at noon. Sign up for our newsletter. Again, I'll put the link to that in the chat to make sure that you're receiving notice. And we also send out the slides and recording after the meeting. And with that, we'll thank everyone for coming today and enjoy the rest of your Wednesday.
All right. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you all.
Thank you.